on Overdrive, a first look at Maruti Suzuki's long-awaited e-Vitara, a made-in-India SUV driven on British roads. We then shift gears to Tata Motors as the company revives an icon, the all-new Tata Sierra, revealed ahead of its return to the Indian market. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I am Soini. We've had plenty of waiting time and had many discussions about when Maruti Suzuki is going to enter the electric space, and that time is finally here. In fact, we've been given a chance to take a closer look at the e-Vitara in UK. Let's take a look.
You know Maruti Suzuki, they are the makers of lightweight, very durable cars. Cars so durable, in fact, that they will refuse to die even if the fuel quality goes bad. No matter how much the government decides to adulterate that fuel with ethanol, they'll simply keep running. They have, of course, had their stints with diesel. They have recently started their stint with hybrids as well, but now they are going full electric with this. This is the e-Vitara, a nameplate that we already know of, but now electrified. In fact, this is a born electric, which is rather big news since Maruti Suzuki is getting into the space. We first saw it at the 2025 Bharat Mobility Show. And to refresh your memory, it's got two lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery options, 49 kWh and 61 kWh, mated to a 174 kilowatt electric motor that is good for 193 Newton meters of torque. It's got a claimed WLTP range of over 340 kilometers, which is probably longer than most Tinder relationships right now. Why WLTP? Well, because we are driving in UK in November. So that's peak November weather for UK. Drizzling a little bit, maybe just opening up a little bit like this, a little bit of slush, a little bit of wet roads, lots of leaves on the road. So you get it. It's a bit tricky. It's a bit uncertain. The car, however, seems super reliable. The way it drives, the way it's performing, it's quite good. Basically, it's the perfect weather to see if this electric Vitara can handle both physics and pessimism. So we have now seen it from the show floors in India to the roads of UK, which is currently the largest consumer of this made-in-India e-Vitara. So what do I think about its design out in the open world? This is the chunkiest Vitara yet. And just like the Vitara, it's not trying to cosplay as something else. It's not trying to imitate some other car. It's an honest crossover design, which I think works really well. The LED DRLs, the squared off wheel arches, those 19-inch wheels, which probably will be downsized for the India spec model. All of that just looks quite nice. The proportions are spot on. It doesn't look too imposing, too in your face, doesn't look like it's trying to bite your head off, because there are no fake grills that are trying to cool an engine that doesn't exist, right? Everything seems purposeful and cleanly laid out. And that cleanliness is what is important. The compact proportions only tell half the story though. Space inside the cabin isn't the roomiest for the segment, but is likely to work for most. What you do get is a 40-20-40 split for the seats. So if you want to carry longer items or something, you have that better versatility right there. So shouldn't be a problem. You also get 3 adjustable headrests. So if you have to stuff 3 adults in the back, safety-wise, you should be fine. Space-wise, I think 2 adults and a kid is going to be a more comfortable setup. And speaking of space, that's the kind of knee room that I get when I adjust the driver's seat to my driving preference. Headroom is decent for my height of 5 feet 8, but anyone taller is going to have a problem. These roads, not a big problem, but back home in India, over potholes, speed humps, etc., if you're taller, you might end up hitting your head against the roof quite often. The sunroof doesn't extend all the way back, but despite that, even with the darker upholstery that you see here, the sense of roominess is quite nice. Even the window line is not too high, so children are also going to have a nice view outside of the windows. You also get ISOFIX style seat mounts here. So with a child seat, the view outside of the windows is going to be quite nice. So the sense of roominess is there. It doesn't feel as claustrophobic or as compact as we thought when we saw the car at the Auto Expo. Here out in the open, it definitely feels quite nice. Foot space is also quite decent, and under thigh support is not too bad. And because this is a born EV, because this is not retrofitted batteries on a and on an older Vitara or something, because this is a born EV, the floor is actually quite nice and low. You're not sitting in a knees up position, which is very important.
The upholstery feels upmarket compared to any of the e-Vitara's Nexa stableweights. But otherwise, the look and the feel of the cabin is familiar.
Step in and you realize it's typical Maruti Suzuki interiors. By that I mean it's functional. There is not a very radical looking arrangement. The layout is nice and clean. Not too big screens. What you get is a 10.25-inch infotainment screen. You also get a digital instrumentation which sits at a slightly offset angle, but the bracket for it is one harmonious unit. And it doesn't feel disorienting in any way, whether you are just waiting at the traffic light or when you are on the move. What I also like is the layered design that you get. You get two-tone finish right here, soft materials, which again looks quite nice. Now, what colors, what materials come to India remains to be seen, because our tastes are obviously different than what we have in Britain here. But the overall fit and finish is that of a premium car. It doesn't feel like an entry-level Maruti Suzuki or a mid-level Maruti Suzuki. It feels nice and premium, and I hope all of that gets carried over to the Indian version as well, because at the end of the day, this is made in India. The plastics that you see at the bottom end, they are child-proof, pet-proof. The upholstery is quite nice as well. Again, remains to be seen what comes to India. But in terms of the space, I think it's quite nice, especially in the front. It feels nice and generous. You're not really sitting in a knees up position. You're not hitting your knees anywhere. The driver's position is very nice. You get a commanding view of the road. You get a sunroof for the front two seats as well. So the sense of roominess is actually quite good. Even the steering is got that square off design, top and bottom. So again, it doesn't look too futuristic or too aggressive, but at the same time feels pretty natural and feels a bit modern compared to the other Suzuki steering wheels that we've seen so far.
The 10.25-inch touchscreen feels reasonably modern, and there is ambient lighting with 12 colors, all of which will be carried over to the India spec model too.
Now, in terms of the boot space, you will not be able to plonk in large suitcases in here. Maybe one large suitcase should be fine, but otherwise that's the kind of space that you get. All your charging equipment is also going to go inside the floor. So in terms of boot space, not the roomiest around.
Well, I'm sure you'd want to know how this SUV drives on the road. More on that after this very short break. Welcome back here with us on Overdrive. The Maruti Suzuki eVitara is a made-in-India product for the world, and before we get a chance to drive it on Indian shores, we got a chance to drive it in British roads to find out just how it feels and whether it's totally built for the global ambitions.
This is the hard-tech platform, but all new for electrification. It is a typical skateboard architecture, giving it the born electric credentials. The battery is neatly integrated into the floor, weight distribution feels sorted, and the ground clearance is pretty good, which means the B roads in UK or the Indian speed breakers both will keep this car unfazed. The moment you steer the eVitara onto the narrow British roads, the first thing you notice is how unintimidating it feels.
Out here on the narrow roads, getting the judgment of all the four corners of the car is not a problem at all. So if you are looking to upgrade from a hatchback or a sedan, a compact sedan, etc., getting the judgment is not going to be something that is unnerving. What also feels natural is the way this car brakes, the way this car handles, the way this car drives.
The power delivery is electric, yes, but never over-eager, which is a good thing.
The throttle response, yes, it is instantaneous, but the way it builds up speed, it's nice and linear. It never feels unnerving.
The 0 to 100 claim is 9.6 seconds, which is not fast. Basically, there is measured progress, and that doesn't surprise new EV drivers.
The braking feels absolutely natural. And while I do miss having paddle shifters to cycle between region modes, you do get a switch right here to give it that single pedal driving characteristic. And it works pretty well.
Some of you might miss proper paddles behind the wheels to control the regeneration, but the calibration of the regenerative braking out of the box feels sorted enough for everyday use. Steering feel follows the same logic: predictable, light in town, grown up on the highway. It's a very normal car driving experience, and that is important. Move to an EV and suddenly being perched sky high because someone stuffed a battery under the seats is a common irritation. But the e-Vitara escapes that.
It isn't spookishly quiet in here, and I can still hear quite a bit. I can hear a bit of the road, and that's not in a bad way.
Which is great. Cars shouldn't feel like an MRI machine. If your reference point is the MG Windsor or the Mahindra BE6, this one feels more mechanically honest, less filtered. And then comes the surprise, ADAS. On British roads, with perfect lane markings and predictable traffic, the system actually behaves confidently.
It still works pretty well. Even in these driving conditions, slightly foggy, slightly drizzly, we have seen adaptive cruise control. So irrespective of what is the higher limit you've set for the speed, it will also adjust the speed of the car depending on the speed of the vehicle in front of you. However, what it's not doing, even in the better UK conditions, is reading speed limits and then automatically reducing the speed as per the limit that you have here. It's still then behaving as per what you have set. If there is no vehicle in front of you, I've set 50 and the speed limit is 20, it will continue at 50. It will not drop it down to 20. When you have put it on adaptive cruise control with the steering assist on and the lane keep assist on, when you have a curve in the road, it will automatically drop the speed a little bit so that you arc a clean line through the corner.
Push it harder and the physics eventually reminds you that you're hauling a 61 kilowatt hour battery. The curb weight is a chunky 1700 kilos. That's over 400 kilos more than the strong hybrid Grand Vitara, which has an engine and batteries. But the suspension has been beefed up accordingly. Over patchy B roads and broken tarmac, it feels composed and not crashy.
It does feel a bit firm. It does feel a bit heavy. Of course, the suspension tuning is going to be different for the India spec vehicle. It will be tuned for the Indian road conditions. But here, for the UK spec, on the UK road, it does make its weight evident.
And yet, the balance is reassuring. Even when body roll leans into the outer wheels, nothing feels clumsy. Ride quality? Exactly what you would expect from an EV that wears the Vitara badge.
It's not something that you will really complain about. But from an EV standpoint, it's actually much better than what we've experienced in some of the other cars. So ride and handling, very comparable to the Vitara or the Grand Vitara that we've experienced so far.
That is very good news for India. And range? Well, this isn't the place for a full-blown deep dive. Our India drive next month will decide that.
A safe bet will be about 250 to 300 kilometers in the Indian driving conditions. Of course, we'll have a much better clarity when we drive it back home in India, but that's my estimate so far. So 250, 300 kilometers shouldn't be a difficult ask.
Reasonable for a battery of this size. Of course, not everything is perfect. The moment you shift into reverse, the nostalgia hits.
The reversing camera is just very low resolution. The resolution definitely needed to be better. The active guidelines are still missing. It still feels like a very entry-level system.
And the audio system
is pretty decent, but we've seen better and we've heard better. So I would have definitely liked a better audio system as well.
Suzuki hasn't tried to reinvent itself with the e-Vitara. It hasn't chased wild performance numbers or fancy screen theatrics. Instead, it has built an EV that feels familiar for a first-time buyer. Sorted enough for long-term confidence and honest enough to slide into daily life without any drama. Just the way a Maruti Suzuki should be. So should you care?
So I think this is an honest effort at being an honest electric SUV or crossover in its space. It's not trying to be aggressive or futuristic just for the sake of it. It's not trying to plonk in massive screens on the inside just for the sake of screaming technology. It's taking the proven formula of the Vitara or the Grand Vitara of easy engineering, good commanding view of the road, a decent presence that doesn't become too radical. It's taking all of that and simply swapping an internal combustion engine for electrons.
It's coming in December 2025, will be made locally, expected to slot above the Grand Vitara hybrid and maybe just a little below the Mahindra BE6, at least that's what I'm hoping. So if the pricing is right, it could be India's first accessible, no-nonsense premium electric SUV from a Japanese brand.
Well, while Maruti Suzuki is preparing to launch its very first electric vehicle, Tata Motors is drawing on its yesteryear's inspiration, bringing back a very prominent SUV named the Sierra back into the Indian market as an all-new product. More on that after this very short break.